I knew something was wrong the moment I saw the video. The security camera notification flashed on my phone. Motion detected, 3:12 a.m. My heart clenched. My hands were sweaty as I tapped the screen. The video loaded, and for a moment I wished I hadn't looked. There he was, standing in front of my door, a bouquet of red roses in his hands. He didn't ring the doorbell. He didn't knock. He just stared, unmoving. The recording continued. After a while, he crouched down and slid an envelope under the door. The screen went dark. A slow, creeping horror crawled over my skin. But this story didn't start here. It started a few nights ago when I made the mistake of accepting a Valentine's Day dinner invitation. I was never a fan of this holiday. I always thought it was pathetic a parade of happy couples or lonely singles drowning in self-pity. But last year, I learned to hate it for a much darker reason. My best friend Sophie had insisted I download a dating app. Just to see what's out there, she said. After a lot of convincing, I gave in. I wasn't expecting anything other than awkward conversations and pointless matches. But then, I met William. He seemed normal. Too normal. Handsome, charming, a freelance photographer with an easygoing vibe. We talked for a week before he asked me out for a Valentine's Day dinner. A first date on Valentine's Day? A little corny. But he was so casual about it, so effortless. So I said yes. Public place, early evening, safe enough. Or so I thought. When I arrived, he was already there, holding a bouquet of red roses. A romantic gesture, but wrong. First date, flowers. It didn't fit. It was like we were skipping a step, like he wasn't getting to know me but rather claiming me. I pretended not to be bothered, took the flowers, thanked him, and followed him inside. At first, everything seemed normal. Light conversation, wine, laughter. But as the night went on, something began to coil inside me. William barely touched his food. He just watched me. His eyes, it was like he was memorizing every detail of my face. Then the questions started. Some were typical, but others weren't. Do you live alone? Do you have security cameras in your apartment? My breath caught in my throat. I answered vaguely, trying to change the subject. But somehow, he always steered the conversation back to unsettling topics. I tried to lighten the mood with a joke. I'm terrible at cooking. I'd probably starve without food delivery. William tilted his head and said, in a tone too soft, "That's okay. You won't need to cook once you're living with me." He laughed, but his eyes weren't joking. My skin prickled. Something in my gut screamed at me to leave. I needed an excuse. "I'll be right back, just need to use the restroom." I stood up, and before I could take a step, he grabbed my wrist. Too tight. His fingers clamped down like a vice, nails digging into my skin. "Don't take too long." His voice was sweet, but his eyes were empty. My stomach churned. I forced a smile, pulled my arm free, and hurried to the restroom, my heart pounding in my chest. I locked the door and fumbled for my phone with shaking fingers. Texted Sophie. "Something's really wrong. Call me now." My phone buzzed almost immediately. I answered in a whisper. "Sophie, help me. I need to get out of here." And then, the door creaked. Cold terror washed over me. I looked in the mirror, and there, through the gap in the door, I saw an eye. He was watching me. I was worried. My heart nearly stopped. He was there. Not waiting outside. He was inside the restroom. One step behind me. Too close. I felt his breath on the back of my neck before I even turned around. I swallowed the panic and forced a smile. "Just fixing my makeup. Be right out." He hesitated. Then he took a step back, letting me leave. But I wasn't going back to that table. I walked straight to a waiter and, with the calmest voice I could manage, said, "I need to pretend I got an urgent phone call. That man," I pointed discreetly at William, "is scaring me." The waiter understood immediately. Seconds later, he approached me with a phone pressed to his ear. "Miss, your urgent call." I grabbed my coat and left without looking back. On the way home, I checked my rearview mirror every minute, expecting to see him following me. My phone buzzed. Text from William. "Where did you go? That wasn't nice. I don't like games. Call me." I blocked his number before I even reached my apartment. Locked every door, shut every curtain, but the horror wasn't over. I woke up in the middle of the night to a phone notification. Motion detected. 3:12 a.m. I opened the video. There he was. standing in front of my door. The same bouquet of roses, the same empty stare. He knocked once, didn't say anything, didn't move. Then he crouched down and slid an envelope under the door. I waited until morning to pick it up. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single note. "You ruined our first date. Don't do it again." I went straight to the police. Showed them everything, the messages, the security footage, the note. They took it seriously, filed a restraining order. William disappeared. His profile on the dating app vanished. I never heard from him again. But to this day, before I go to bed, I check every lock. And I never go on a first date without telling someone exactly where I am. The woman at the door wasn't happy to see the flowers. She didn't smile. She didn't look surprised. Instead, she turned pale. Her eyes flickered between shock and pure terror. "Who sent this?" Her voice was a hoarse whisper, as if she was afraid to even say the words. I glanced at the card attached to the bouquet of red roses. There was only a short message, "To my one and only." No name, no signature. She blinked a few times, looking dazed. Then, in a barely audible voice, she said, "Take them away." And that's when I knew. She recognized the sender, and she wanted those flowers gone. I've been working as a delivery driver for a flower shop in Chicago for almost a year now. It wasn't a bad job. I spent most of my time driving around the city, dropping off flowers to happy people. And during Valentine's week, the streets were filled with last-minute husbands and love-struck couples. That night, the shop stayed open late to meet demand. My boss, Henry, asked me to take a few extra deliveries before closing. I had no plans, so I said yes. Most of the deliveries were the usual. A few smiling faces, a couple of women tearing up at their surprise bouquets, one pair making out right in front of me. Nothing unusual. But the second to last delivery of the night was different. I picked up a bouquet of red roses and checked the order details. Mallory Carter. The card simply read, "To my one and only. No sender." The address was in a quiet suburban neighborhood, about 20 minutes away. When I arrived, the house was completely dark. No porch decorations, no candles in the window, nothing to suggest a Valentine surprise. The only light was a dim porch lamp. I stepped out, bouquet in hand, and walked to the door. I knocked twice. Silence. I waited a moment and knocked again. I heard soft footsteps inside. The door cracked open. And then I saw her, Mallory. A woman in her 30s, her eyes swollen from crying, her skin pale like she hadn't slept in days. When she saw the bouquet, she froze. Her face twisted in a way that made every hair on my body stand up. "Who sent this?" she asked, voice low and urgent. "There's no name on the card," I answered, suddenly uncomfortable. She stared at the note. Her face went even paler. Then she whispered, "Take them away." Are you sure? Maybe they're from an admirer?" "I don't want them!" She cut me off. Her eyes were wide, filled with panic. She looked around, like she expected someone to be watching. A chill ran down my spine. "Is someone bothering you?" I asked, now completely on edge. She didn't answer. She just shook her head, swallowed hard, and before I could say anything else, slammed the door in my face. I stood there for a moment, still holding the bouquet like an idiot. Something about her reaction left me unnerved. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't confusion. It was fear. And you don't fear a simple secret admirer. When I got back to the shop, I told Henry what happened. He frowned, went to the computer, and pulled up the order history. "That's weird," he muttered. "What?" "The order came through our website, but there's no name on the customer profile." My throat went dry. "What do you mean?" He clicked around a few more times, then stopped. His eyes narrowed at the screen. It was paid in cash, placed in person at the shop. A shiver crawled down my spine. "Do you remember who placed it?" Henry shook his head. "I wasn't here. Annie took the order." We found Annie in the back of the store, counting the register. She frowned when we asked. "Oh yeah, I remember that one. Guy was weird. Didn't say much, just handed me the cash and wrote the card himself." My heart started pounding. What did he look like? Wore a dark hoodie, kept his head down the whole time. I tried making small talk, but he just mumbled something and left. Silence filled the air. "Do we still have the original paper?" I asked, my voice tight. Henry rummaged through a drawer and found the note. I took it and, without thinking, ran my fingers over the words. The paper was pressed down hard, like he had written with force. Something felt wrong. I tilted the paper against the light, and then my blood ran cold. Underneath the words, "To my one and only," there was another message, heavily erased but still visible if you looked closely enough. It said, "I found you." The note slipped from my hands. Henry and Annie stared at me. I knew, right then, that Mallory already knew who sent the flowers. And she was terrified because he had found her. I tried not to think too much about it over the next few days. Maybe it was just a stalker she had already reported. Maybe the police were handling it. But then, a week later, I saw a small news article buried in the local paper. A woman in Mallory's neighborhood had filed a police report. She claimed a man had been watching her for months, but they had never been able to catch him. No arrests were made. It didn't take a genius to connect the dots. I quit the flower shop 2 weeks later. To this day, every time I see a bouquet of red roses on Valentine's Day, I wonder, how many are sent by people who truly love someone? And how many are sent by someone who refuses to let go? At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe I was just being paranoid. I've always had psychological trauma since childhood. My stepfather contributed to that, and to this day, I hate him with all my heart. But this time, maybe it was all in my head. But when he stopped beside us and said, "My name," my horror story began. I knew it wasn't just in my head. I've never been a fan of Valentine's Day. Seeing happy couples everywhere gave me a certain irritation, not because I hated love, but because it reminded me of how I always seem to be alone during this time of year. My best friend Taylor didn't accept my excuse to stay home and binge watch television shows. "Let's go out for dinner," she insisted. "Just the two of us. No drama, no fake romances, just good food and wine." I hesitated, but in the end, I gave in. We chose a small French bistro in Cincinnati, a charming and quiet place, away from the chaos of crowded restaurants that night. We ordered a bottle of wine, settled into a table by the window, and started our favorite pastime. People. Watching. From our spot, we could see different kinds of couples. There were the newly dating ones, exchanging shy glances and smiling too much. The long-married couples, dining in comfortable silencier in a cold, distant one, depending on their relationship. The awkward first date pair, where one talked too much while the other just nodded, pretending to be interested. It was fun until I saw him. A man sitting alone at the bar, drinking slowly, not eating anything. And he was looking in our direction. At first, I tried to ignore it, but every time I looked up, he was still there. "That guy is staring at you," Taylor whispered, noticing my expression. I know. Maybe he's waiting for someone. Maybe. But something inside me said, that wasn't the case. He wasn't looking at the door. He wasn't checking his phone. He was only looking at me. The night went on, and we tried to ignore him. But every time I allowed myself to glance over there, he was. Not blinking, not looking away. A strange discomfort settled in my chest. A tingling sensation at the back of my neck, a silent warning from my own body. I wanted to leave. And then when we finished dessert and asked for the check, he got up from his chair. I held my breath. I hoped he would just walk away, pass right by us. But he didn't. He walked toward us and stopped beside our table. "Excuse me," he said, his voice too calm. "But I think I know you." My blood ran cold. Taylor and I exchanged a glance. "No, I don't think so," I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. He watched me for a moment, his dark eyes empty of any real expression. Then, he smiled. A small, controlled, wrong smile. Maybe I'm mistaken. He turned and walked away. I let out the breath I hadn't even realized I was holding. "What the hell was that?" Taylor whispered. "I don't know, but my stomach was twisting. I just wanted to get out of there." We paid the bill and decided to walk home since we lived nearby. The night was cold, the streets lit by streetlights and shop windows still open. But after a few blocks, I knew. We weren't alone. I didn't look back immediately, but my body felt it. The weight of a stare. The same tingling at the back of my neck. The same internal warning. I pretended to adjust my scarf and glanced at the window of a parked car. The reflection confirmed my worst fear. He was behind us. walking at the same pace, just a few meters away. My breath grew heavy. "Taylor," I murmured. "He's following us." I saw her face go pale. "Are you sure?" "Yes." She gripped my arm. "What do we do?" I looked ahead. We were near a convenience store, the last one open on that street. "We go in there." We changed our path and walked inside the store. The warm air and the bright white lights gave me a false sense of security. Taylor pretended to browse the shelves. I pretended to grab a soda. But my eyes were locked on the glass door. And then, there he was, across the street, standing still, hands in his pockets, his gaze fixed on me. The clock on my wrist read 11:47 p.m. The store was empty, except for us and the cashier, an old man who seemed to care about nothing but his radio. My heart was pounding. And then, he turned and walked away. Did he give up? I waited a few more minutes to be sure. When everything seemed safe, we left. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. "I think he's gone." Taylor nodded, looking just as relieved as I was. "Let's go." We changed our route, taking a busier street. I was about to believe it was over. But the next morning, I woke up to my phone vibrating. A message, unknown number. And the text said, I knew you. See you soon." My body went cold. My mind spun, trying to understand how. My number wasn't public. I had never seen that man before. Taylor swore we never said our names out loud at the restaurant. So, how did he know who I was? I ran to the police station. The officers were attentive, but there wasn't much they could do with a single message from an unknown number. They advised me to be careful. Change my number. Never walk alone. Time passed. I never received another message. I never saw that man again. But now, every time I walk into a restaurant, I feel the need to scan the room. Since that day, I hate men. I still blame my stepfather for that. And when I see a man sitting alone at the bar, drinking without talking to anyone, I wonder if he's just waiting for someone, who his next victim will be, or if he's waiting for me. You never know. I had never seen that face before. At least, that's what I thought. But when that terrifying woman whispered my name that night, I knew I was wrong. I've always been a discreet person. No Instagram, no Facebook. I only use WhatsApp. I hate every holiday, including Valentine's Day, which was never anything special to me. I wasn't scared, but to me it felt like a day of horror. While half the world went on romantic dates or dined by candlelight, I just wanted to spend the night at home, away from couples declaring their love as if it were their last chance to prove it. But my best friend, Eric, didn't accept my excuse to stay in. "Come on, let's go out. No isolating yourself. Just one drink, that's all." After a lot of insisting, I gave in. We ended up in a low-key bar in downtown Indianapolis, one of those places that wasn't fancy, but wasn't run down either. Just ordinary. The kind of place where no one looks at you for too long. Or at least that's what I thought. The night was uneventful. We ordered beers, talked about work, laughed about absurd things in life. The bar was full, but not packed. Couples occupied some tables, friends drank at the counter, everything was normal. Until I saw her, a woman standing at the entrance, as if waiting for someone. She wore a long, dark coat, hands buried in her pockets, her posture rigid. Her eyes were downcast, fixed on the floor. Something about her made me stop. It wasn't the coat, it wasn't the way she stood there, completely still. It was the feeling. That deep unease, like when you sense someone watching you but can't prove it. I forced myself to ignore her. But when I finished my beer and looked toward the door again, she was still there. And now she was staring directly at me. I felt uneasy the rest of the night. Maybe she was waiting for a date. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But my mind wouldn't accept those excuses so easily. So when I finally decided it was time to go home, I made sure to check where she was. And she was gone. I left the bar, trying not to think too much about it. The parking lot was nearly empty. The cold night air wrapped around me as I walked to my car, my boots echoing against the wet pavement. That's when I noticed someone was standing near the entrance of my building. Her, the woman from the bar. My heart skipped a beat. She wasn't waiting for anyone. She was waiting for me. My mind raced. Maybe she lived in my building. Maybe she was just passing by. But when our eyes met, I knew. She knew who I was. I forced myself to stay calm, pretending not to care. I kept walking, my keys already clenched in my hand. And then she smiled. A small, controlled smile, like we were about to resume a conversation that had been interrupted. And then she said something that made the air leave my lungs. "Happy Valentine's Day, Daniel." My body froze. I didn't know this woman, but she knew my name. My mind spun. Maybe she overheard Eric saying my name at the bar. Maybe it was just a coincidence. I tried not to show the panic crawling up my spine. "Sorry, do I know you?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. She tilted her head. "You don't remember, but I remember you." A chill slithered down my spine. The way she said that, no anger, no emotion, just certainty. She had something at her waist. It looked like a knife, but I couldn't be sure. I wanted to run, but something told me that showing fear would only make things worse. I swallowed hard and took a step back. "I think you have the wrong person." She only smiled. And then she said something that made no sense at all. "I've waited so long for this night." Every muscle in my body locked up. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. But I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't stay to find out. I turned and walked into my building without looking back. At home, I locked the door, checked it twice. No matter how much I tried to calm myself, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. What did she mean by that? I didn't sleep well that night. Every little sound made me hold my breath. But the night passed and nothing happened. It wasn't until the next morning that I realized the story wasn't over. Because when I opened my apartment door, I found something hanging from the doorknob. A photograph. My throat tightened. It was an old photo from a high school event. I recognized my own face in it 17 years old, laughing with a group of friends. And then I saw her. In the background, slightly out of focus. But there, her, the woman from the bar, the woman from the parking lot. She had always been there, watching me, waiting, and below the photo, written in neat handwriting, were 3 words. "I never forgot." I went straight to the police. I showed them the photo, told them everything. They took it seriously, but without a direct threat, without a crime committed, there wasn't much they could do. They told me to stay alert, to report if she appeared again, but she never did. No more messages, no more notes. Time passed. But even today, when I walk alone at night, I feel that familiar chill at the back of my neck, that sensation of being watched. And I wonder, is she still waiting? Will she come back one day? If you enjoyed these stories, please consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Your feedback is invaluable to us. We'd love to know which story resonated with you the most, so feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Stay tuned for more captivating content by continuing to watch the video playing now. Thank you for your support, and see you next time.